Hey, listen, in this video, I want to answer a question that I think many people in the context of the Christian faith are asking regularly and repeatedly. And it's simply this: is God calling me to be single? How do I know? In this video, I'm going to answer that question for you. Stay tuned. So listen, there's a lot of conversation surrounding this subject of singleness, specifically for followers of Jesus. And a lot of the conversation, I think, has increased as statistics are showing that there are people who are, one, making decisions not to get married in ways that are different than previous generations. And also statistically, what we're seeing is people are taking longer to make the decision to get married, meaning they're marrying later in life. And so there are people who are within the context of the Christian faith who are passionate about marriage and want to be married. And then there are others who are indifferent about it. And then there are others who might be opposed to it. And no matter what category people find themselves in, there's a question that a lot of them wrestle with, and that is God calling me to be single? And how do I know? And so what I want to do in this video is kind of walk you through some questions to kind of ask yourself to discern the answer. Because one of the ways that we practice discernment is by asking questions. Now, when I say discernment, I'm not talking about the spiritual gift of discerning of spirits. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the God-given ability to recognize the true nature of a thing and to govern yourself accordingly. I'm not talking about paranoia that comes from pain or cynicism that comes from scars. I'm talking about the ability to assess a situation based on principles in Scripture and or promptings from the Spirit. That's it, right? Because some people operate with paranoia, and that comes from pain in their past, and they call that discernment, and it's like you're just paranoid. And then there are some people that operate with cynicism from their suffering in their past, and they call that hyper-spiritual sensitivity. And it's like, nah, you're just kind of cynical. You've suffered, and we get it, but it's made you look at life with the glass half empty and not half full. Discernment isn't cynicism. It isn't paranoia. It is the God-given ability to recognize the true nature of a thing and to govern yourself accordingly. And that recognition comes through the pages of Scripture. That Scripture becomes a filter that you put some of these things you're trying to decide through, and or promptings from the Spirit. All right. So how do I know? How do I discern if God's calling me to be single? All right. Here are a few questions that I would encourage someone to think through. One, do you sense that God's clearly spoken that to you? That's where we start. It's not where we end. It's where we start, because sometimes the answer to that question for some people is an emphatic yes. Then what I would say is, okay, your next step then is to ask God to give you the grace, which is not just unmerited favor, it's unearned ability. Acts says, and the Lord added to his church daily, and great grace was upon them all. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul says that God says to him, my grace, unearned ability, is sufficient for you, right? Like spiritual gifts, one word for spiritual gifts, charismata, is grace gifts. God given us gifts, abilities we didn't earn. Okay? So we need to ask for the grace. A person would need to ask for the grace now to deal with the inconveniences of singleness. Because remember, marriage is not a right. Singleness is not a curse. I want you to think about that. As a matter of fact, the Apostle Paul was single. Jesus was single. The Apostle Paul was single. He wrote over 2/3 of the New Testament. And the Apostle Paul told those disciples, at least in his context, he's like, hey, if you are called to this and if you're able to do this, you're able to, meaning live a single life. It's like there's an impact that you're able to make, or there is a degree of impact you're able to make and contribution you're able to make that will be different than someone who's married who has to split attention. So Paul kind of walks through that. So has God clearly told you that? Okay, so if the answer to that is an emphatic yes, then that's where we start. And you obey that, right? Until God tells you different. But let's say the answer to that is not an emphatic yes. Let's say the answer to that is I don't know, or I hadn't heard anything. Then we got to go to the next question, which I believe is, okay, not just has God told me that, 2 is, do I want that? Now, I am not saying that everything we want is God's will. I am saying that God, biblically speaking, does work through our wants. Does he work through all of our wants? No. Does he work through some of our wants? Yes, because there are some wants we have that he gave us. Philippians 2 says, it is God who works in us to will and to do his good pleasure. So God gives me and you some want tos, and he gives us some want tos regarding things he wants for us. I want you to think about that. So I can take you to biblical narratives that kind of point to this, right? I could take you to stories in the Old Testament like Hannah, who wanted a child. She just wanted a child. She just wanted a child. And she could not shake this relentless, incessant desire to give birth to a child. And she made God a promise. She said, if you give me a child, I'm going to give this child back to you. I want you to think about that. That was a want to. Now, did God use that want to? 100%. Because who did she give birth to? She gave birth to Samuel. She wanted a baby. Israel needed a judge, a civil and spiritual leader. That's who Samuel was. Think about that. So God is at work sometimes through our wants. I'm not saying he gives us everything we want and everything we want is God. I know the heart's deceitful. Who can know it? Yet at the same time, God doesn't always give me desires of my heart in terms of the thing my heart wants, but he will give my heart what to want. I want to impact people in ministry. I want to write books that change people's lives. I'm creating this content for you right now because I want to. And you know what? There are some people who don't want this. They have no desire at all to be sitting in front of a camera talking the way that I'm talking. Because some of these want tos are what I call unique desires. See, we've got unique design. We've been designed uniquely by God. And we've got unique destiny, right? There's unique contribution and impact that you and I are supposed to make on the earth. But then we also have unique desires, and those unique desires align with that unique design, and it aligns with that unique destiny. So there are some things that I want that you don't want because they're my destiny and not yours. And there are some things that you want that I don't want because it's your destiny and it's not mine. This is why comparison is insanity. I literally want you to think about that. Comparison is absolute insanity. Because we got unique design and unique desires and a unique destiny. Yet at the same time, we want to have a uniform life and a uniform life. We want to have uniform experiences and uniform outcomes. It doesn't work that way. So this is why I want to unequivocally say, okay, do you want to? And if you want a single life, I think go for it. But if you don't, if you say, no, I don't want that, I don't desire it, okay, then we need to go to the next question. Not did God tell me, not do I Not just do I want to. Here's the third one. Am I ready for a partner? Like when I really think of it, like, okay, because if I'm not ready, a person may not be called to singleness forever, but they may be called to singleness in a season. Am I ready? That means, when I say, am I ready? Are you emotionally and spiritually? Now, that's not the only areas, but primarily, are you emotionally and spiritually at a place of health that you can properly steward relationship with another person? Can you handle them without injuring them? Would it be unwise for God to send them to you now? In other words, I'm asking, are you ready? Here's the way one leader put it. Are you the person that the person you are looking for is looking for? And if not, you may not be called to singleness forever. You may be called to singleness in this season. And then here's the last and final question I would encourage someone to ask is, can I live a single life ethically? So I say that very clearly because that is a very specific issue that Paul addresses when he's dealing with this issue of singleness in Corinthians. He's like, hey, some of you cannot, you got desires, you got urges, the way you built, the way you are wired, the single life is not for you. And he's like, for you, it is better for you to marry than to burn with passion. That's what he means. It's better married than to burn. It's better to marry than to burn with passion. He's not saying that is the only reason to get married, right? That's not what he's saying. Yet at the same time, he is saying that's an indication that you might not be called to singleness. And so what I encourage you to do is to walk yourself through that particular framework. And this is what you need to know. And I want to encourage you with this. God's timing is God's kindness. That the time that it happens is always the best time for it to happen. Even though it's taken a long time, doesn't mean it won't be the right time. So if you're going to be walking into singleness, you can walk in it with grace, joy, favor, and blessing. And if you're waiting on a Ruth or a Boaz, then you can wait with grace, joy, blessing, and favor. Because when it's God's time, it'll be worth the wait. All right. Hope this helped. Take care. God bless.